Thank you for joining us today for our seminar in the Journey to Science series at Onondaga Community College. This seminar is sponsored by the Bridges to Baccalaureate grant, and this semester we are hosting a total of 6 speakers in STEM and STEM-related fields. Introducing our speaker, Buffy, today will be Dr. Justin Feeney, who is in charge of the Bridges grant at OCC, and he also works with Buffy Quinn on an NSF grant.
Thank you, Lisi. So Buffy began her science career as a geospatial analyst in industry, started teaching on the side and enjoyed it so much she decided to embark on a second career as a professor. Since then, Buffy has received awards for her teaching and her service to OCC and was recently awarded an NSF, a National Science Foundation grant to integrate the analysis of data acquired from unmanned aerial vehicles, often referred to as drones, to integrate the data acquired from those systems into OCC's geospatial technology degree. As you're watching, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A button at the top, and you can submit your questions at any time, and we will cover them at the end. Thank you, Buffy, for taking the time to share your story with us. Let's welcome Buffy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Buffy Quinn. The first thing I always do when I introduce myself to a new group of people or when I have my new class is that I tell them all that Buffy is my real name. And so I always get that out there because a lot of people think that Buffy is my nickname, or like maybe I got the name like when I was a kid and just couldn't give it up, but my parents wanted me to have a revolutionary name. So I was born in the 60s, and so they named me after a singer named Buffy St. Marie. And she was a Native American civil rights activist, and she protested the Vietnam War. She was on Sesame Street teaching kids how to read and stuff. So anyway, that's who I was named after. So that is my real name. Sometimes there's a little baggage that goes along with the name Buffy, that's for sure. And as I'll tell you in just a little minute, or in just a minute on my journey, I actually changed my name for a while because I felt like it was really tough to be taken seriously in the work world, especially in the sort of male-dominated field that I was in. So anyway, when I was asked to do this, and thinking about my journey to science, I was wondering sort of where to begin. And I can't say that my journey was really very well mapped out. That's a little geospatial joke. By the way, I'm wearing my Map Ninja t-shirt today. It says, "Follow the way of the map," Map Ninja. And, you know, ironically, when it comes to this journey, I did not have a map. And so when I was looking back on sort of where I would start this journey, it was kind of hard to know, because it wasn't as if one day I woke up and I said, this is my path, I will be a geospatial analyst. So I just started thinking about sort of what made me have, or how I came to the different decisions that I came to as I was thinking about what I was going to do in my life as a kid. And so I think the sort of plan really started really early. In deciding sort of what to tell you today or how much to tell you, I decided that I'd sort of focus my talk on students today. Students who are perhaps beginning their college careers or wondering what they're going to do, or those thinking that they're doomed because they don't have this pathway. So, you know, I had a really chaotic childhood. There was a lot of just chaos at home. My father suffered greatly with a mental illness, and so there was that. And then there was food insecurity at times. There was, you know, show up after school and there's no power. It's been cut because the bill wasn't paid, or eviction notices because rent wasn't paid. So I think a lot of people, when they meet me and they hear I'm from Mississippi and my name is Buffy, they have this idea that I must have sort of grown up on a plantation or something. But it's the absolute opposite. Grew up in a family that would have been considered working poor. My father, for many, many years, could not work, and so my mother was a single mom, essentially, raising all of us and keeping the household. And so for me, school was always a really safe place. It was a place where there wasn't a lot of chaos. I think I really appreciated the order of, like, even the desks in the classroom, and the idea that, you know, you had a schedule and you there was bells to tell you when to change class. So even as a really little kid, I'm thinking back, like, you know, 9 years old and 10 years old, like in 3rd and 4th grade, I really kind of loved all of that order, and I kept my notebooks really tidy and orderly. And so I don't think it was that I was the best student, really. I just really loved that sort of safe, orderly place of school. And I found that another way to sort of escape some of that chaos was through reading. I was a voracious reader. I had a library card really early, and if I wasn't at school, at some club meeting or some extracurricular, I would go to the library and just spend hours there. It was free. And it was air conditioned, which means a lot when you're in Mississippi. You really need that. So no air conditioning at home, hang out at the really cozy, cool library. So just learn to read a lot. I still do. That is part of what I really carry with me to this day. I read anything and everything. So school was a good, safe place for me. And I was never the smartest kid in class, but I worked really hard. I knew that an education was going to be the thing that was going to bring me this kind of comfort, and perhaps, I don't think I was thinking about it this early, but the idea of having sort of a nice, stable, quiet life would come with an education. So when I got to high school, I remember, so like in 9th grade, we did a tour of the high school, the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade school. And so I went to public school in Mississippi, and it wasn't a very well-funded school, as you can imagine, a public school in Mississippi, but I remember we toured the Votech building on the high school campus, and it also was air conditioned. I realized this was a theme throughout my journey to science, was the sort of yearning for air conditioning in southern Mississippi. So on this tour, we went into the Votech building, vocational and technical education, and into the drafting room. And it was all boys, and they were drawing with T-squares and triangles and these mechanical pencils, and they had electric erasers. It was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I said, "Oh, I would like to do that." And so I signed up for mechanical drafting when I was in 10th grade, and I loved it. I was the only girl, but I couldn't figure out why that was like male dominated, because like you had to be very meticulous. Like we were working on vellum, and you had to like keep your hands off, because you would like get it with your sweat on there, and you had to keep it really neat and tidy. You couldn't have like the erasures everywhere. So anyway, I learned how to do hand lettering and mechanical drafting. The next year, I took architectural drafting. It was 2 years out of the day, 2 hours out of each day, and I really liked it. I was really good at it. I was in VICA competitions, the Vocational Industrial Clubs of America, and I enjoyed it very much. And so when thinking about sort of college, I was like, well, I liked architectural drawing, and I was pretty good at it. And I said, well, you know, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but you know, architect was a job title, and I was in architectural drafting, so why not? Hey, what the heck? Let's do architecture. And so I applied to the School of Architecture at Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi, and got in. I couldn't believe it. It was a competitive program. I got in, I had some scholarship money. Now, along the way, sort of while I'm in high school, I'm also working. I worked at McDonald's for several years, and it was a pretty grueling schedule. I would go to school during the day, go home, do homework, have dinner, and then go into McDonald's between 7 and 9 p.m. and then close the restaurant. So I would get home probably like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then get up and go to school the next day. Because in Mississippi, you can get your driver's license at 15. So the whole time I'm in high school, I'm also working. I had a variety of jobs too. When I wasn't working at McDonald's, I was a counselor for a while. I worked in a veterinarian's office, and by my senior year, I'd gotten some work experience and doing the drafting kind of thing. I was going to go to Mississippi State, and I had the opportunity to do a little program at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. They sort of adopted our underperforming public school, and I got a job. So before I went to Mississippi State, I got a job at the medical center doing drafting. I was drawing the inventions of my boss. He worked in the physiology department. That's when I learned the difference between an MD and a PhD. So the guy I worked for was a biomechanical engineer. And this department, they invented things like knee joint, like artificial joints and the artificial heart valves. And the guy that I worked for was inventing, essentially it's called a video velocimeter. So the same way that they can use lasers to tell you how fast a baseball is being thrown or a bat is hitting a ball, he was using that kind of technique to measure the blood flow, or the velocity of blood flow in little tiny vessels. So anyway, he hired me, a high school student, to draw his inventions to submit with his patent applications. All right, so here I am. I got some drafting, I've got some work experience, I've saved up my money, I'm going to Mississippi State. And I take the math placement test, and it is bad. I did really, really bad. So they put me in developmental math, and I decided that I had to sort of knock this out, because I was going to have to take a lot of classes at Mississippi State that were very heavy math related. So I went to Hines Junior College. That's what they called community colleges back then. And I took classes in algebra and trig and American history and English comp. And that was where I got my first taste of sort of what a community college had to offer. The class was really small, the professor was great, and I made an A in algebra. I'd never made an A in math in my life. I was always the reader kid. I was never the math kid. So that made me very happy. I made a B in trig, and then transferred those credits to Mississippi State University and was in the architecture program. And I was primarily on scholarships at Mississippi State, and then also the money that I had saved from all of my jobs in high school. And I lived in the dorms, but I didn't have a meal plan. And at that time, you could do that. I don't even think they allow that anymore. So what I would do is, I couldn't get a job. It was a rural campus, and I was used to working, but it was a rural campus. I didn't have a car, and there were no funds left for me to do work study. So I had to get really clever about money. And the way that I would wash my clothes is that I would offer to wash everybody else's clothes, like in my dorm, and then just throw my clothes in with theirs. So they had to pay for the quarters and the detergent and stuff like that. So I would just throw mine in. So I was always very entrepreneurial, in getting by. And then because I didn't have a meal plan, really, I lost weight when I was a freshman. So I went to, and I am not kidding, I went to every free club meeting on campus because they offered free food. I'm telling you, every meal there was a lot of pizza eaten that semester. But it turns out the architecture program was also really expensive. And the sort of nitty gritty is that I liked architecture, but it was really expensive. Lots of equipment to buy, lots of specialty art equipment and art books and things. And I remember that I was sitting in a studio and we were going to have to spend $12 on a watercolor brush. And I just broke down in tears because I had $12. And so, like, really, I essentially had to drop out of that program for want of a $12 brush. It was so ridiculous. Like, I wish I had reached out to someone at Mississippi State and just told them that. But I mean, it's hard to just sort of admit to someone that you don't have enough money, right? You feel like you have failed in some way, when in fact, I know now, in the position that I am now as an educator at a community college, I mean, like, I can look back and say that if I had just told a professor, I don't have $12, I don't have $1, I'm sure, I mean, he probably would have pulled it out of his pocket and bought me the brush, or at least hooked me up with some of those resources on campus. So anyway, if that's you, if you're in that spot, tell somebody. I know it's hard to admit that you don't have money for something, but very often a little bit of money can solve a lot of problems. So anyway, I essentially dropped out of that program. I became an English major because you didn't have to buy anything special, and the books were in the library. I wasn't happy though. And so I started sort of looking around at things that I might like to do. I liked college, I liked being away from home and living on campus, but it just wasn't sort of a good fit for me. So I started looking around and discovered the University of Southern Mississippi had a program in geography. And one of the things that you could do with that degree is cartography, which is making maps. And I thought this might be what I'm looking for, in that it's still kind of like drawing. I'd always liked kind of urban areas and cities, and thought that what I liked about that was the buildings. And so I said, you know, I think I could do that. And so I transferred to the University of Southern Mississippi, and it was a much better fit. I was the only female geography student, which to me seems crazy. Geography I've never really thought of that as being sort of a male-dominated field, but I was the only girl at Southern Miss, and it was a more urban campus. I was able to get a job through an internship. So that meant that I had enough money to live, right? I lived in the dorm, I had a meal plan. I had my job. The job that I got was as a cartographer for a civil engineering company. I made maps for things like landfill sightings and for all of their published reports. So I really enjoyed it, and I excelled in that program. And with that internship, they hired me on after I graduated. And because I had to work anyway, I just went to school through every like summer holiday and every break. So I finished in 3.5 years, not because I was especially smart or studious. I was there anyway. There was no real reason for me to leave for a summer, since I had a job. So anyway, I had a good time. It was a company called Neal Schaefer. They still exist. And they are in Hattiesburg and in Jackson, Mississippi. I liked it. It was a 9-to-5 job. I had a nice little drafting table, and I learned AutoCAD there. That's computer-aided drafting. And while I was there, after I graduated, so I graduated from college in 1990, and I was happy at Neal Schaefer, making maps and doing things. Oh, one of the projects that I did. So when you're the new kid at an engineering company, you do the worst work. So in my journey to science, I did some really gross things. One of them was a waste characterization study. So we were doing a landfill design. And when you're designing a landfill, you have to figure out how big it's going to be. And you figure out how big it's going to be based on how much stuff you're going to have to put in it, and then how long it's going to last. If you fill it up every day with municipal waste, household garbage, how long is it going to last? So how big does it have to be? In order to know all that, you have to go and dig through the waste. Yes, that is what I did. In the hot August sun of Mississippi, you put on a full-on hazmat suit, a Tyvek suit, and you, so I rode on the garbage trucks and counted how many houses they picked up, the little counter, and made notes. Then we went to the dump. We weighed the truck, so before and after, so we knew how many pounds of garbage we had. And then I had to pick through it. We had to pick through it. We had to separate out like the plastic from the baby diapers, the food, the paper. It was really horrible, y'all. So you might have to do some horrible things your first job's out. So anyway, but I was happy to be a part of the new solid waste master plan. So the job was going fine. And one day, a guy I was dating said he was going to go to graduate school, and that once he got his graduate degree, he would always be smarter than me. Right? Right, what a jerk. And like I knew that dude was not any smarter than I was. And so I really just kind of took that as a dare. I was like, I'm thinking, if he can get into graduate school, then certainly I can. So on a dare, really, I applied to graduate school and I got in. And so for all of you undergrads or thinking about undergrads, here's the thing about graduate school. If you're not going into a professional program like law or medicine or business, you normally don't have to pay for grad school. You apply, and then they accept you, and then usually they'll give you your tuition is covered, and then they'll give you a stipend for either teaching or doing research. So if you're thinking that grad school might be a cool thing, but you think, how could I ever afford it? Know that many programs, especially in the STEM disciplines, you don't pay for graduate school. They pay you. So keep that in mind. So I got in. I went to the University of Denver. Now, I had never been out of Mississippi. When I went to Denver, my winter jacket was an unlined denim jacket. That's it. That's the only winter coat that I had. So I was in for a surprise. So all that air conditioning I was looking for really early on, oh, I got plenty of cold weather when I went out to Denver. It was amazingly cold. It was the first time I'd really seen any snow. So it was quite the culture shock. But boy, I really liked graduate school. And when I got there, they told me I would be a teaching assistant. I was like, oh no, there's no way I can do that. Like, you gotta be really smart to be a teaching assistant. And there is no way that I know enough to like teach other people. That's crazy. But they're like, no, this is okay. You will be prepared. And so as a teaching assistant, really, I taught an environmental systems kind of 1 year long. We were on a quarter system. So I stayed about 1 week ahead of the students on many of those topics because I had not taken exactly that class as an undergrad. But I did like it. I liked teaching. I liked working in the lab. And while I was there, so I was taking sort of more advanced classes in geographic thought. I thought that was really cool. And me, voracious reader, so I'm just eating it up. I'm really digging it. And when it came time to sort of think about a research topic, I wasn't quite sure, but that professor at Hines Junior College, he kind of taught me that math was something that I could do. And so I took on, for my graduate work, for my master's degree, climate modeling. It was the most statistical thing I could have chosen. It was so crazy, but like, he convinced me that math was something that I could do. And I did stats as an undergrad, and I did do it. And so it was crazy that this kid now from Mississippi in the trailer park is now doing statistics at the University of Denver. It was nuts. So I liked that. So I got paid a small stipend for teaching, and I had a really cool job when I was in graduate school. I got the job in the summer after my first academic year and then kept it throughout the second year, but it was as a park ranger in Colorado. And being outside was really fun, all the wildlife that was there. It was on a reservoir, so I learned how to pilot a boat. I learned all about the ecosystem out there. There was a lot of public relations. But anyway, it was great fun. And it did teach me that a fully outside job was probably not for me, because it did get really cold, and no matter the weather, if it's really raining and bad, you got to be out there. So like when all common sense would tell you to sort of get out of a boat, like during this fantastic lightning storm, you're on a boat and you think to yourself, I should really go in. I should not be on the water while it's lightning. Well, you got to go out and you have to, as the park ranger, have to get in the boat and go get people who don't have the same common sense as you. So, but it was really fun. It taught me a lot about the kinds of work that I like to do. And it was about this time in my life that I decided to change my name. I was trying to get sort of jobs after graduate school, and you've got the resume, and on the top you have your name all centered in a big font, and Buffy was right up there, and I just felt like people weren't taking me seriously, because I had a lot of really good work experience. I was doing really good research. I had won awards for teaching and for my research, both as an undergrad and a graduate student. And so I picked a family name and went by that for many years. And in fact, many people, my friends in Denver, will call me by that other name now, because that's how I went. So I mention that because I know that that's something that other folks sometimes have to consider. It's like, are you presenting your real self? Real, that's funny, it's ironic because I changed my name to be more real. But I think that my name, I felt like it was sort of keeping me back. Later, I didn't care so much, so I changed it back. But so after graduate school, I finally did find a job with my new name. By the way, I went as Quinn as my first name, and then a family name is my last name. I had to go to court in front of a judge and change it, and so that's another experience. But after graduate school, I applied for jobs all over the country. And this was sort of pre-internet, so I'd go to the public library again and get all the Sunday newspapers for all the big cities around the country and just look for work. I interviewed for a job at Louisiana State University, and that was going well. I didn't get it at the last minute, but that's all right. I ended up getting a job with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in Denver, Colorado. And one of the things I wanted to let y'all know about is that I was what's called a contractor. These jobs are very, I guess it's very common to get a contractor position with some of these STEM jobs. So I did work, I was on site for the Environmental Protection Agency, but my paycheck was signed by a company called ICF Kaiser. And the way that works is sort of a company gets a contract with the EPA, and then the company hires people to do the work in the contract. So therefore, contractor. So if you see that, that's all that means. But while I was there at the EPA, I got my first real chance to work with geographic information systems. Though that takes data and links it to a map in a digital environment, so it's easy to make edits. It's easy to capture a lot of information in one place. And then because you're linking data to map features, then you can start to see patterns on the maps and patterns in the data. I did a lot of statistics again. We were modeling environmental risk assessment. We were working on, and I say we, there was a team of 4 of us, 4 GIS technicians and analysts. We were working on environmental justice issues. When I graduated from the University of Denver in 1993. It was the very beginning of Bill Clinton's declaration of a cabinet position to investigate environmental justice. And that's the idea that in communities of color and in impoverished communities, that those people have a greater burden, a greater environmental burden due to the co-location of hazardous waste facilities and polluting industries. So did a lot of work there, sort of linking up my mapping and statistics with social justice issues. I enjoyed that work very much. We also did some surveying. The computing power also is amazing. One of the reasons I had to get a job with the federal government was at that point, the geographic information system software was so expensive and it required a huge machine to run it. And the only people who could really afford the software and the hardware at that time was the federal government. Now you can get it an application on your smartphone. They give it away free to students. But at the time, it was still really expensive. Data was expensive. The contract that my company had, ICF Kaiser, they lost the contract to Lockheed Martin. So they both bid on the contract. Lockheed won. And so Lockheed said that they would hire all of us on to work for Lockheed rather than ICF Kaiser to continue to be contractors. But I was thinking, you know, I had been in Denver for a while, and I was thinking that it might be time for a change, and maybe I would use this opportunity to sort of try something new. So I said, you know, I got lucky before, I'm going to try it again. So I applied to the PhD program at Syracuse University and got in. I applied only to like 3 big schools, Penn State, which is a major geographic school of thought, Syracuse University, another major geography program, and the University of Cincinnati. And I got in. I couldn't believe it. So I came. They paid my tuition, and I had a stipend to teach. Now, here's another bit of advice for you if you're considering going to graduate school. You can negotiate that stuff. So they called me. So at the time, my sort of like cartographic hero, his name is Mark Monmonier, and he teaches at Syracuse University. So he called me on the phone. I couldn't believe it. He called me on the phone and said that I had been accepted, but that they did not have any teaching opportunities for me, but that my tuition was covered. And I said, well, I can't really do that. You know, I have to have a job. I had a job in Denver, and I said, well, you know, I had decided that if I didn't get funded in graduate school, that I was going to get my certificate to teach high school science, because I thought, you know, the teaching stuff that I learned at the University of Denver, I liked, so I thought I would do that. So when Mark Monmonier called me and said, we can fund you, but no job associated with it, I said, well, no thanks. So he called back and he said, okay, well, we can give you a stipend for the spring semester, but you'll have to figure out something for the fall semester. And I was like, no, I got to have a job. So called back, both semesters were funded. So anyway, if that happens to you, you can negotiate. So I started the program here at Syracuse University, moved here, lived on campus housing, and gosh, I didn't love it. I did not love the geography program at Syracuse University. It wasn't a good fit. I was one of the only students who had any kind of work experience, and it was not a good fit. as we say. So I looked for a job here in Syracuse because I liked Syracuse. I liked sort of the industrial landscape of Syracuse. The more I learned about the history of the area, I really liked it. And it was real far away from Mississippi. Had always, as soon as I could get out, I got out and went as far away as I could. And New York always seemed like the polar opposite of Mississippi. So I really liked it here. And I got a job with a company called O'Brien Gear, which is now Ramboll. And I was a GIS technician, and I did AutoCAD. I did a lot of drafting there. And I worked primarily on remediation projects. So sites that had chemical contamination, pollution in the ground and in the groundwater and the soil, cleaning up or, mapping those sites. The reason you have to map those sites is because teams will go out and collect samples all over the site. And so it may be soil, it may be groundwater or surface water, and all those samples happen at a location. So we can map the location of all of those samples, but then they take those samples and send them to a lab and they get results, sort of what was the contamination at that site. So we can link all that contamination data back to the point on the map. And that's how you know sort of where you've got to dig or where you've got to bury or where you've got to continue to test and treat. I liked that, but I had a little idea always, it's sort of in the back of my mind, that I wanted to start my own business. So while I left O'Brien & Gear to start my own business, and I did, I had some work. I helped municipalities fill out and write grants from the state of New York to implement their own GIS programs, their Geographic Information Systems programs. So we would write a grant together, and then I would perform the needs assessment and then help them get their systems up and running. I did that for a while, and I kind of liked being my own boss. It was a little lonely though. I was a team of one, and I worked out of my house. And I got a call one day from a person who works at Parsons. Parsons is another company here in Syracuse. They're headquartered in Pasadena, California. And they asked me if I would consider coming to work for them as a GIS analyst. And so I said yes, I gave it a shot, and I'm glad I did. Because when I was working there, I worked almost entirely on the Onondaga Lake cleanup project, a project that I'd known about because I was always interested in the history of this region. And so I was a GIS analyst. I was actually, my title was Principal GIS Specialist. By this point, I'd been doing GIS for, almost 15 years. Almost. And I was creating statistical models again. Gosh, it's so crazy that when I think about how far I came mathematically, but we were building statistical models, and I was mapping where the contamination was in the sediment of Onondaga Lake. And then we would use those maps to determine sort of the depth and the areal extent, so we could calculate a volume of the contamination underneath Onondaga Lake. I also was able to work with the Citizen Participation Project. I wrote fact sheets for the Department of Environmental Conservation, and I found that one of the things I was able to do was I was able to take really complicated technical, scientific, statistical information and write about it in a way where a lay audience could understand it. So I started writing things for public meetings, preparing statements, and eventually became the project manager for the habitat restoration program around the lake and in the lake. This was a very sort of public focused project, a lot of public input. And I enjoyed that aspect of being able to sort of link the science of the sort of the chemistry and the statistics and the sort of hardcore analysis with that outreach to the public. Because really, to me, that was always the point of restoring Onondaga Lake is restoring it for the community. I worked there for several years, and got or saw that OCC in 2009 was looking for part-time meteorology instructors. And you know, like I said, I kind of learned how to teach in graduate school. I liked it. And although my degree is not in meteorology, my graduate work was in climatology. And they're essentially the same, just at different scales. Meteorology is sort of the atmospheric physics, or the processes occurring sort of in the atmosphere today or right now or in the next few days. And climate is just that sort of extended over a much longer period or over a global scale. So I applied for the job here, 2009 part-time. I got that, and I taught meteorology for several years. And in 2013, I became a full-time member of the faculty here. My home department is chemistry and physical science. I have taught courses in meteorology. In geographic information systems, we offer two of those, an intro to GIS and then an applied GIS, where students do their own project. I also created a natural hazards and disasters course, which I like very much. It's very fun to teach. And in fact, I'm working with a publisher right now. I am writing my own textbook for that class, and I look forward to using that beginning in the fall. So my students will be able to use that book. I hope they like it as much as I do. I just created this new geospatial science and technology program with help from the National Geospatial Technology Center of Excellence down in Louisville, Kentucky. It is sort of a think tank, sort of a hub of activity funded by the National Science Foundation. They provide resources to community colleges who are starting and building these programs. So with all of my industry experience, by this point it was over 20 years, bringing that experience in with the teaching experience, it just seemed like a good fit, and also a way to bring a new high-tech degree program into the OCC community. And then most recently, so it's been only a few months now, we were awarded a National Science Foundation grant. I always wanted to be a part of the NSF club, so last October submitted that application. Dr. Justin Feeney, the person who introduced me, he is the co-principal investigator on this grant. I am the principal investigator. Those are the terms that the National Science Foundation uses. But this is, it's funds to help us integrate UAV data analysis into this geospatial program. So NSF is paying for our time to do research into building this curriculum, building relationships with our industry partners, certainly some equipment, some drones or unmanned aerial vehicles, also some specialized equipment for doing that kind of analysis. So this is where my journey has led me. I wish sometimes there had been a map very early on showing me exactly how to go. The way I presented it here, it sounds like I just had it, you know, I just took one step and the next step and it was all easy going. It wasn't. There were some glitches along the way. But if you're thinking about a STEM or a science discipline, don't be afraid of those missteps or those questions along the way, because it's in answering those questions, I think you really, you know, find the stuff that you're good at. Maybe you realize the stuff that you're really scared of is not quite so scary. And I encourage you all to continue on along this path. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time today.
Well, Buffy, thank you very, very much for sharing all of that with us. Something that really stood out and that you included in your summary just now is the fact that this was not a straight path. And I know our students, a lot of them, they come in and they're coming in as older adults. Basically, they're not 18 fresh out of high school, and they feel like they failed somehow, right? Whatever they did before they came to OCC didn't work out, or maybe they're coming back for a new career or their first career. And they're often very hesitant. They feel like they don't belong. They look around and feel out of place. What is something that you'd like to tell those students?
Oh gosh, well, this was my second career. I I kind of did the GIS thing and I enjoyed it. But I always like trying something new, and it was hard, you know, to take something sort of tried and true and do something new. But I think that's part of what makes education fun, is that it's constant exploration. I mean, I right now feel like I'm killing myself trying to learn this new technology, because my students, you know, I'm 30 years older than my students, and I feel like they just pick it up in an instant, and I feel like it takes me longer, but that's okay. You know, I think being a little scared might be what motivated me in some cases, knowing that I could probably overcome it. That unknown was kind of, you know, scary and exciting. So I just go for it. I mean, there is no right answer. And like I said, this was not a path that I was on. It was just this series of decisions I made. You know, if I can add in here too, so my little sister and I sort of grew up in the same family with that same kind of chaos, and we handled it in very different ways. So whereas I buried myself in school and school books, she sort of took a very different approach to trying to deal with all that chaos. She was eventually incarcerated for drug manufacturing, and you know, I mean, it's a very different life now. And so those decisions that you make are going to lead you on this path. So I think if you're always just sort of with that idea in mind that you're going to just try the best you can every day, where you end up is going to be okay.
Well, that certainly is encouraging to see where you've come from and see where you are now. And I bet anything that the 10-year-old you had no idea where this was headed. Now, look, now that you have the luxury of hindsight, would you do anything differently?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm happy with the way it turned out, but I think I could have done a few things to make it a little easier on myself. For one, that reaching out to someone when I really needed it at that time, I think that could have really eased a lot of burdens. You know, if I had just told someone, like when I'm a freshman in college, like, I'm hungry, you know, I don't have $12 for a brush. I had to sell my physics textbook, which I failed, by the way. I had to, you know, I wish I had asked for help.
Buffy, I had one question for you. You had mentioned you worked at McDonald's and the schedule was really demanding. And I wonder if that experience early on of hard work, if that was always in you, or whether that experience through McDonald's kind of taught you a little bit about hard work. Because when I work with you, you inspire me with your hard work. You know, you are on it and you get it done, and you seem to have a sense of discipline and ownership of your work. That I wonder if, did you ever think that just some of your more your first job at McDonald's, did that lay a groundwork for you that helped, you know, to get you where you're at?
Justin, that's really nice of you to say. And I don't know that I've ever really been that introspective about my thoughts about work and stuff, because I mean, really, not to really belabor this point, but Justin, we were poor, right? And so like I had to work. I contributed to the household income. And it, you know, it wasn't, I didn't have a job to buy luxury items, right? Like, I was able-bodied and had it, and so I just felt like it was my obligation. And I think maybe that's what I carry. It's not this idea about work and the importance, but it's this idea of doing what I can at all times in whatever situation to just sort of make it the best it can be given the circumstances, right? So, I mean, I've always just kind of, I just do what needs to be done. And And again, it's getting back to that idea, learning how to ask for help. Even today, it's still hard, right? Learning how to delegate things is hard. But I just try to get it done.
Wow, what a get it done attitude. Something that you mentioned a couple of times that stood out to me as a fellow female scientist is that time and time again in your career, you found yourself in a program with all men, in an office with all men, in a job surrounded by men. Do you have any words that you'd like to share specifically with women that are headed into a career that would traditionally be seen more as a male field?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so I do not want to be like the spokesperson for like all women everywhere in these disciplines. I don't know, Lacey. I always felt like I had to work harder to be considered an equal with my male colleagues at work. Like I always had to do more to be perceived as doing the right amount. And so I don't know if that was actually occurring, but it's that idea of like perception is reality. It's like I had to stay later. I had to, write more. I had to put in more overtime hours without compensation. There were times when I would get really angry. Like I would be in a meeting and the project manager, he would turn his chair like away from me as I was talking, like that. And I would just get up and leave. I was very quick to anger and quick to respond. I think as I've gotten a little older, I've kind of relaxed, but those little microaggressions, those little jabs, it gets old for sure. I had a great experience in college, being the only female geography major. I was never made to feel that it was unusual or different, but at work I did. And so no, I don't have any advice. Some days are really hard, and some days you just want to scream, and I don't know.
Oh, it sounds like despite all that, look where you are now. And I just want to point out that the total number of NSF grants at OCC right now is 1. And then that 1 grant is being administered by Buffy Quinn from Mississippi.
Thank you, Lacey. Thank you.
So,
yeah. I'm very proud of that. That was a lot of effort, and I always thought of the National Science Foundation as the pinnacle of all things smart and cool and sciencey. And to be a member of that club now is really, really awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much for being with us today. And you are now officially part of the pinnacle of smart and sciencey. So we really appreciate you sharing your time with us. I certainly learned a lot from you. For those of you joining us live, there's a link to a survey in the comments. Go ahead and fill that out to help us continue bringing you these seminars. And in 2 weeks, we'll be back with our next guest. On November 18, we'll be welcoming another female scientist, Danielle Berry. Danielle graduated from OCC in 2013. She completed a PhD in chemistry earlier this year and is now working at the Dow Chemical Company. And we'll hope to see many of you back on the 18th. Thank you. Bye-bye.